the current market price for temporary trade. They take that off the trade in the register. That gives them a dry price, and that's what they try to use, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's probably, again, it's a bit case by case, to be quite honest. We don't have specific rules that says we have to do one thing or another when it comes to that, to be quite honest. Again, we probably just take that higher view that we try and get it back to a sustainable price, and if we need to make a small adjustment because that's, it's got carryover, or it's wet versus dry or anything else, we'll kind of make a case for that, transaction by transaction. But there's no specific rules we have to allow for that.
So in a sense, that's largely in the transgression of the local bank who deals with that particular case, am I correct?
Yeah, both the banker and the credit officer, because both of them would view the transaction.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I had a good question, now it's gone. So from your, let's do that one first and then I'll ask the other one. So from your personal practice with dealing with all this, what are some barriers and difficulties you routinely face when you try to value that water parcels, or like what are some of the things you run into?
Well, look, I think those complications you just talked about are probably the key one.
Yeah.
Understanding wet and dry and carry over and all those sorts of things. I mean, if you're out and out talking about a dry allocation versus a dry allocation, it's not particularly difficult to find out market price or to compare and really within a few minutes sort of work out where the market is at and what value really is attached to something.
Yeah.
Where you've got those complications, it certainly is, and that's where our challenges could be, because we rely on others to kind of help us through that process of not being water experts ourselves. So that's certainly one. That's probably the big one, to be quite honest, in terms of lending against water as an asset. The temporary market and just the understanding of that and the drivers behind that, it can be difficult at times because that can fluctuate so quickly. But I'm not sure there's a lot we can do about that. But that's probably it, I would think.
How do you assess intervalley trade restrictions? I mean, from my perspective as a researcher, it'd be like, okay, this is in a certain catchment, this is what the market price says, but we also know, that intervalley trade restriction is probably never going to open again kind of situation, so I'll give it a discount because I know it's less fungible, for example. Or something like that along those lines.
Look, it's probably something we don't necessarily come across a lot, again, because of where we sit here. We don't have, we probably don't get exposed to that a lot. So to be totally honest, I think the answer is we probably don't give it a lot of weight. That's the honest answer to that.
Yeah, but you do business in the Murrumbidgee, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, because I mean, I've heard from some stakeholders that the intervalley trade restriction from the Murrumbidgee going outward is probably never going to open again.
Yes, and someone probably more in that water zone is probably better positioned to answer that question than me, to be totally honest. It's,
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Sorry for asking all the
no, that's all right.
Questions which seem to be a bit problematic. You talked before about that you try to get an appreciation of the sustainability of a business and to assess the risks of continuously lending for them and stuff like that.
Yep.
Certainly there's a lot more models out there now in terms of business. So for example, I talked to some people in the almond industry, and they told me essentially, there's going to be two models of almond growers in the future. Pretty much one of them owns the orchard and all the capital on the ground and buys or leases the water, and the other one owns just the water, no capital on the ground, and leases the complete orchard. Also, a lot of those permanent plantings coming up are not backed up by high reliability entitlements at all. They're completely reliant on temporary water trading for their supply. Obviously, that has impacts on the sustainability of the business case, right? How do you deal with these kind of considerations?
generally on a customer by customer basis, we'll do what we call a year in, year out analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll basically sit down there and work out in a normalised year, particularly if they're producing, so, they've got X amount of hectares planted to this, in an average year they'll yield this, 5-year average price for the product is this,
mm-hmm.
To try and work out a sustainable sort of income level,
mm-hmm.
and then we'll flow that down to costs as well. So I guess in a scenario where we've got customers that don't own all their water or don't own water at all,
mm-hmm.
one of the risk factors we will play with in that scenario is the price of water.
Mm-hmm.
So we might do a base case there,
mm-hmm.
and then we might do a case number one, which says, all right, well, what happens if water doubles or triples in price?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll rerun the model
mm-hmm.
with that as a risk factor in, just to see if the business remains sustainable at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, we'll sometimes do that with fruit prices or whatever else, just to give a number of different scenarios around, what are the key risk factors in this business, and what happens if one of those triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll bring that into our decision making then around are these guys sustainable and to what level, and what kind of equity ratios are we going to look for in this particular
mm-hmm.
transaction.
Mm-hmm. From your personal involvement, I suppose, is there some sort of yardstick rule in the sense that, the bank generally prefers, I don't know, if a prospective business would have the majority of their water needs and high security entitlements in the same region, or is it really just like, it doesn't actually matter if you're 100% reliable and temporary, or if you have 100% secured and high reliability, it depends on the case-by-case business scenario?
Look, I think the reality is there is a preference for customers who have sufficient water allocation
mm-hmm.
to water whatever farming enterprise they have.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we don't necessarily shy away for if someone doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's just an additional risk factor we need to bear in mind.
Yeah.
And I guess the key for us when someone comes to us who doesn't have water is just to understand what their water strategy is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, as a rule, tell people what their strategy has to be, but we want to see that they've put some thought into it, and that it is a risk mitigating strategy, and it's a medium term one at least.
Mm-hmm.
Someone turns around and says, "Oh, we just buy it all on the spot market when we need it." That would be a risk factor that would be quite clearly called out, and then that would materially impact how much we're prepared to lend them and where we would allow their gearing to go, mm-hmm. and what sort of covenants we might put in place, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. And in light of the things you just said, one of sort of the latest risk management tool to the table is forward water contracts. How do you view that as a proposition to secure one's water supply? I know that certain businesses I talk to are heavily involved in forwards, so like up to 30-40% of their complete water needs come from forwards.
Yes, and that's we've got one customer in particular I can think of who does have forwards,
mm-hmm.
And that's just part of their overall water strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, we're quite comfortable with them because their strategy is sound. They've thought through it. They've got multiple different actions in place to sort of manage their water, and on that basis, we're quite fine with it.
Okay. Yeah. So in that sense, you would say that the bank is quite happy with forwards as an instrument as to just demonstrate risk mitigation.
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. Do you think, just from a personal perspective and a bit of a contentious question, I suppose, do you think the banks fully understand and appreciate the water asset as an asset class, or do you think there's still a lot more learning to be done compared to the agricultural businesses or people who've been in the industry for forever?
I think if you gave a number of 100 for how well we understand agriculture generally and how to grow things and that sort of stuff, and allocated to, I think water's probably about 30.
Yeah.
And agriculture's probably 100. I think that's the gap.
Yeah.
I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, that's certainly my gut feeling from talking to people, but it's interesting because I've asked a number of bankers those questions, and most of bankers are happy to concede, we'll have to do some more work there, and others are like, no, we're up to scratch, and I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, the honest answer is we're not. I mean, we'll